All right, guys, here we are, back with episode 5 of Beyond the Clutch with Austin, aka IQAP. And Austin, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself right now?
My name is Austin. I am the director of esports at Glenville State University in West Virginia. I come from a background of competing in esports collegiately. Competed for a couple orgs in my past too for FIFA and Call of Duty. And yeah, I love esports. Also used to do wrestling. That's how I kind of came up with competitive spirit, and so glad that I get to do it now in esports and kind of give people the opportunity that was given to me and try and make it even better than what I got.
Awesome, awesome. Uh, so what does your role as director of esports entail, and how do you balance managing the program's competitive, academic, and community aspects?
Yeah, so as director of esports here at Glenville State, we have two components here already. We have the club component where, we're kind of open for all our students to come and, partake in activities and stuff. They get to use our PCs, they get to use, we have six 75-inch TVs with different consoles as well, a racing simulator. We have a lot of different technology in the room that students can come and utilize for fun. We usually do it from like 10 a.m. to about 5 p.m. Once 5 p.m. hits, then we switch over to our varsity. Currently compete in seven different games: Rivals, Rocket League, Super Smash, Fortnite, Madden, MLB The Show, and Tekken 8. We're adding FIFA and Call of Duty in the spring, so we're adding two more titles. We're sadly losing Super Smash though. So yeah, it's very unfortunate, but I'm glad we can still add two more games to balance it out. Um, but yeah, so we got a lot of students. I got about 30 students here. 15 of them are strictly esports students, and then 15 of them are, athletes from other teams that decided they wanted to come and compete. My Fortnite team is all track athletes. They're doing great. I think currently they're ranked, I want to say in ECAC, they are like number 25 in ECAC and
Out of how many teams?
in the hundreds. Like there's over 100 teams that compete in that league, so they're doing really well in there. And then we've played in the PCL for Fortnite as well, and they've competed in the national championship for the first split, which was duos build. I think I had a 29th, a 31st, and a 35th finish from them because we have duos teams. And they sadly, because of the update that Fortnite just had, we aren't going to be able to compete in the national championship just because it's during Thanksgiving. But, a lot of our students have to go home. They have to go spend time with family. That's a big thing that I like to integrate with our student life stuff is, you know, esports is super important. I think it's one of those things that, it's an opportunity, it's a privilege to compete. But, I try to always balance it out with my students to basically be like, make sure you're also doing the right things in your own life, make sure you're taking care of yourself as a person, make sure you're taking care of those around you. And, sometimes, there's competitions every semester. We can compete in anything. So when something like this comes around and they're like, hey, this is my 1 week before, finals, all these hard, exams coming up to go see my family before Christmas and everything. I kind of sat here and like as a coach, it's hard because, you always want to be the highest level competing, but at the same time, you have to give these students the freedom. 'Cause especially my Fortnite team, as I said, they also compete in track. So all seven of them are high level athletes in track and field as well. So, they're not balancing just esports and academics, they're balancing track as well. So they wake up 8 a.m.s for class, then they go straight to track practice, and then right after track practice, they're eating, they're coming into the room, they're competing. You know, it's really hard for them to sometimes manage. So when they, have the opportunity to go see their family and stuff, I think it's really important to give them that freedom um, to go do that. And then yeah, academically, I'm a big academic guy. I finished college with honors in both my degrees. I have an undergrad in digital media art and design and a master's in business administration. So I always preach, we're here to compete in esports, but at the same time, we're here to further ourselves as professionals as well. Whether that's trying to be a professional gamer, whether that's working in esports or any other field. I think it's super important that we do our best in the classroom as well. So, I try to foster a community that is, we want to compete at a high level, to compete at that high level, taking that academic pressure off us, the best way to do that is just stay on top of everything. So, our students, they come in, they've gotten really close with me. So like I've had a couple of them that are like, Coach, I just got to get this assignment done. What can you do to help me? And I'm like, listen, if I know the subject, I'll sit down, I'll help you through it. If I don't, listen, sit down in the room. I'll make sure you get your assignment done. You're not leaving until it's done. And they've really bought into all that, because our slogan here at Glenville State is "We can, we will, watch us," and it kind of plays into we're a program that's coming up right now. We've been around for 5 years. I just got this job about a month and a half ago, and we've been around. We haven't been super relevant though in the huge scenes. Finally getting to that point though, we just won 2 division titles in PCL in the ranked division. Rocket League outscored their opponents like what, like almost 80 to like 12 throughout
My
8 games. Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. I have, if you can tell a little bit from the video, I have purple hair currently because I made a deal with my players that if they scored 20 goals in one series, they had to 3-0 them. But if they scored 20 goals in that series, I would dye my hair. So they did it. They scored 21. And no, they're great. And Thursdays is a great day here. I made a deal with my Fortnite team who was averaging at the time, that all of them, like I said, track. They've never been in the competitive scene for esports. Um, you know, I made a deal with them. I was like, they're scoring about 60 points. I was like, if you guys score over 100 points one of these weeks, I'll dress up as a banana every Thursday. So every Thursday for the
Banana.
rest, yep, I'm a banana every Thursday this semester. So no,
I'm gonna need a picture of that when you do
oh,
it.
I got you. I got you. Yeah, no, it's a great time. It's become a thing. Everyone on campus loves it. There's a funny picture. The first day I had to wear it, someone sniped me from our library walking down the hill in the banana costume. So, no, it's great. No, and that's my biggest thing as a coach is I try to make it fun. Sometimes especially in esports, I always tell people compared to traditional sports and everything, you can physically outmaneuver someone in traditional sports, football, wrestling, all those. Sometimes you can just turn your brain off and just let the physical work do its thing. Esports is the exact opposite. Your brain's going 24/7. It gets hard. And I think a lot of people forget that part of like competitive gaming is, you know, this stuff isn't just like fun sometimes. It gets hard, it gets, draining, and you have to kind of make it fun for these students. And that's what I try to do. I really just try to have a good time with all of them, make sure that their mental well-being is good throughout the game, and also outside of the game because, it's important. We all want to be happy, we all want to be enjoying life. So whatever I can do as a coach to help that, I try my best to do it.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. And I know they're in good hands too, because that's a really good outlook on stuff.
Thank you.
Glenville State's esports program competes in the Play vs Collegiate League PCL and the ECAC. Can you tell us about the current state of the program and any exciting developments or goals you have for the team this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we just won our first 2 division titles in the ranked category in PCL for Rocket League and Marvel Rivals. I got great leaders on those teams. I think the biggest thing for those teams currently has been a lot of these kids have come into a program and they've played individually for so long, solo queuing, all these different things. So the hardest part for them has been, getting used to this team environment where you have 5 other people on your team who are there to support you. And, if you don't communicate with them, it's going to be harder on you because you're going to put a lot of pressure on yourself. So, we've really worked a lot on, getting used to this team aspect, competing against these high level teams. We've played schools like Radford, Rochester Institute of Technology, great collegiate esports programs that are very well known, and we've won these games. Both those teams went through the regular season undefeated. Super Smash, they went 6-2. They played RIT as well. They played Seton Hall. They've played all these big programs that have been around for a while. And no, it's been great because previously they were competing in the NACE division, and I think it was the MAEC. I don't know what that. I think it's like the Mountain or the Mid Atlantic Esports Conference. Um, and those are great conferences. I'm not going to talk badly about any of them. They all have their own individual things that they do well. But I've thought of extending our reach on the esports scene. PCL and ECAC were the two to do it in. So I moved us over. We're competing at some really high level competition week in, week out. And no, I'm super excited because the plan right now is to compete in these two and then start bringing in these teams who can take us even further. CRL, the collegiate, like CCL for Call of Duty, collegiate Call of Duty, collegiate R6, whatever the games are. The goal is to compete at the highest level of all these, and then even in like PCL and ECAC to compete in their premier divisions and start winning those because that's what a competition is. And I'm very blessed with the students that I have here already. They're all dedicated. They're very into what we want to do here. So these students, they give their heart to this program, and I love it.
That's awesome. I had a quick, like, kind of like a caveat, I guess.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, approximately how many players in your program are on
hmm
scholarships or full ride scholarships?
So currently, like I said, I got the job about a month and a half ago. We do have scholarship opportunity. Currently, I only have one student on scholarship though. Reason
And
being
that's
for
a
that
full
is
that's a full ride?
nope, not full ride. He just has some money that helps out with his academic goals and everything. The reason being that I haven't given out any additional scholarship to our students right now is, we have to start recruiting externally to start building these programs. I've reached out to all kinds of different players so far. I'm talking to players from Europe, North America, all over the world. And, sometimes you have to really allocate your funds correctly and make sure you're spreading the love to the teams that necessarily don't always think they need it, but you know, you kind of have to be smart with your scholarship money because it's one of those where if you spend all your money on one student and this roster comes in that you're like, man, I really want them, but all your funds are away, you're gone. You kind of have to be smart about it. So, all my students though, they've been super, super okay with it. I haven't had any problems with anyone. They're here for the love of the game, and I love it. There's a lot of passion in this room for what we're doing. So, scholarship, yeah, it always sounds nice on paper, but sometimes, you get these students who come in and they just sit here and they're so grateful for the opportunity to just compete, and that's what I have here, and I'm super grateful for that.
Awesome. That is awesome. Um, you led King University's esports team to a national Call of Duty championship in 2023. How has that
hmm
experience shaped your approach to building Glenville's program?
No, it's been great. I still talk to all my old teammates too, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity that we had. We won three different championships in PCL, Play VS, NACE, all across these different leagues, and yeah, I'm super grateful for it because it taught me a lot. Because coming from FIFA and wrestling, which are very individual sports and games, getting used to the team environment, the team aspect of everything was huge for me as a competitor because kind of what I'm teaching my students now about communicating, making sure that we're, being a team. If I didn't play COD, if I didn't, have that experience with those three other guys on my team, I wouldn't be able to do this coaching and teaching with the players that I currently have because, I'm a big believer in preach what you know. If I don't know it, I'll find someone who does. So kind of having that look on life from playing COD where I can say like, hey, comms are super important. If you don't calm, there's gonna be teams who are worse than you who can beat you if they just calm. So, having that outlook now from my time competing with all of them has been, huge in my role as a coach, and I'm so grateful for it, and the ability to just play at that level and, win championships, with friends, not even just teammates, and that's the thing I love about our program too, that I've kind of, you know, made very clear here is that we're not just, one team. Our rivals team supports our Rocket League team. Our, Rocket League team supports our Fortnite team. Like we're all one big program. We have a Fortnite team, we have a Rocket team, but we're Glenville State Esports. And that kind of came from just being on that team that I was a part of because I have my roommate who is now the director of esports at my old school. He was always supporting. He was always there. He's a great guy. When we both took positions as directors, both of us just wanted the best for one another, and I'm super grateful for his support too. So, no, like having this environment of where we play as a team across, not just our games, but as a whole program, it's huge. And without Call of Duty in my life, and having the support from outside teammates who play different games, I wouldn't be where I am right now.
Plus, unlike other esports directors, you can actually, you know, you've practiced what you're preaching, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You've been at that stage, you played collegiately at the highest level possible, things like that. So your players are going to respect you more because of that, and
Yeah, no.
that's a
They
really
respect the
valuable
crap
thing.
out of me. They do. I was nervous at first, when I took this job because, I'm 23. I'm not one of these, super experienced, been around too long, directors. But they respect me and they respect that. I still do compete. I actually about 2 months ago I competed in the USAEF uh, PES eFootball qualifiers for the Pan American Games. I finished second behind, very strong contender. So I'm still active competing as well. I play Honors of Kings as well. It's a mobile MOBA. I actually just hit my peak. I'm about to be the highest rank in the game. So um, yeah, just they see that I still compete and they come to me for that advice on like how do you handle it and everything. I actually had a conversation with one of my students about how do you become a director? What attributes, what skills, and big thing I told him was you just have to have a vision for what you want for not just your teams but what you want for the greater good of this sport. Because I think sometimes what directors forget is, you're not just representing your school, you're representing, the entire community of esports, especially here in North America, where, I don't mean to talk bad about North American esports, but we're a little behind compared to other regions, so, college esports is kind of that gateway of improving the scene in North America. I'll speak very highly of a friend of mine. His name's DJ TJ. He's down at Concord. He's phenomenal. He last year as a student he hosted a Rocket League tournament at one of the DreamHacks. It was a strictly collegiate Rocket League tournament, and that was massive for us. Being able to have these tournaments. He did it again this year in Atlanta, having the opportunity to go compete in these different games like that and being a part of the success of North American esports, it's huge. So, we always have to be on the lookout for how can we improve this scene and, make esports something more inclusive to everybody because, without diversity in esports, without different walks of life showing up in your room, you become stagnant. No one's learning anything. I think that's the best part is, going to DreamHacks, changed my perspective on life as a coach. I've got to meet some awesome people. I'll drop a name, Justin Tan from Elevate. He's a great person, love him to death. I got to be a part of kind of their experience winning Call of Duty Mobile World Championships and talk to their players, talk to their coach from the team, and it's kind of where everything changed for me. And got to their coach looked at me. He was like, "How much do you love this?" And I was like, "I love esports." And he was like, "You should look into doing this then full time." And here I am. I'm blessed to be able to do this now.
That's awesome. Um, so how do you identify and recruit talented student athletes for your esports team, and what qualities do you look for in the players beyond just being good at the specific game you're recruiting them for?
Yeah. My biggest thing is I want high level athletes. The goal is to compete at the highest level and not just to kind of exist. That was something big when I got hired was, how do we put us on the map? And so when I look for, these recruits that I want to have for these different games, I'm looking at, what's your skill level? What's your experience? What's your goals? Every time I talk to a new recruit, my first question is, what do you want to do at the collegiate scene? Because there's some people who just see this as an opportunity to go to college, and there's nothing wrong with that. It is a great opportunity now. A lot having the ability to have scholarships for this now. I grew up in that generation still kind of now where it was like video games ain't gonna take you nowhere, and now look at us. We're thriving. Esports is a huge thing all over the world now. So kind of destroyed that mentality of esports doesn't do anything for you. So no, I always ask these kids though, I'm like, what do you want to do? And I look for the kids who sit here and they're like, I want to represent something bigger than me. Um, because, at the same time of, representing the school again, I go back to, even not just us as coaches, but us as competitors as well. We represent what esports truly means. So, I look for the kids who want to be at this level, who want to improve the esports scene, who want to compete and win, all these different things And then, outside of esports, the big thing I look for is just good people. I believe truly that, when you surround yourself with the people that have similar goals in life beyond just the game, you're going to build a program that loves one another and is truly one big family. So, these kids that I recruit, I get to know them. I sit down and talk with all of them over a call. I truly get a feel for who they are as a person, and if they're a good fit, personality wise, we do a lot of community stuff as well here on campus. Bring in a lot of different organizations. For example, we brought Monster Energy here to campus. They did an event with us, and it was great. And I had such good feedback from all the people from Monster. My students, I didn't even have to tell my students. My students were walking over, introducing themselves, telling these people who they are, what their goals are, and not just esports but life. And those are the kind of kids I want. I want kids who want to really be a part of this and express what this really truly means to them.
Wow. Um, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Esports at the collegiate level often integrates academics with competition. How does Glenville State support its esports athletes in maintaining academic success alongside their competitive commitments? Now, you talked about in the beginning of this interview, you talked about how you yourself uh, supports your esports athletes and stuff like that. Maybe talk a little bit about how the university itself prides itself or supports academics in the esports and program.
Absolutely, yeah. No, so our school, I'm very blessed to be at a school like this with the support and the, pride in what we're trying to do here. I just had a meeting with the president not too long ago, talking about how he's seeing everything and he's super happy about it. Asking what can he do for this program? How can we further our reach in esports? The support from the school, my boss, everyone around me has been phenomenal. And the biggest thing was, we're looking for a coach who wants to come in and not just play video games all day, but also wants to be a part of these students' life and their success. And that support from the external people from when I interviewed to now being here and seeing it in person, it's true. They don't want to just have someone sitting in this office doing nothing. They stop by the office every day saying, "Hey, what can we do to help? What can we do to improve?" I've had so many meetings over the last month and a half with people here on campus just saying, "What can we do to help these students? What can we do to make sure that there's academic success, to make sure there's competitive success?" And this school really prides itself on being, a powerhouse in many sports. We have a wrestling team on campus who is number 8 in the country right now across all the rankings. We had a girl just win the region for cross country. So we have so many great athletes, and now with this entire like mentality shift of me coming in and being like, we're going to build something out of this program. The school has just latched on and said, what can we do? How can we support it? And that's why I tell all my recruits as well, and all the students here, every person you come across here on campus, tell them that you appreciate their help, because even though they might not look like the person that's helping this program, they are. All these professors, all these people who are trying to get you through college, help you be successful academically. All the people who are in, presidential positions, VPs, executive staff, they're all here to support you and help you. And you might not see it because a lot of it goes through me, but they really are here to help.
Awesome. And out of curiosity, I interviewed somebody that was in the high school esports scene and stuff like that.
hmm
They were talking about how they had to maintain a certain GPA, certain grade point average and stuff like that. I think it was like a C average. Do you
hmm
have like a certain qualifications for your student athletes as well, or is it kind of just whatever?
No, we definitely do have academic standards. That was one big thing that I came in my first weekend. I didn't even talk about competitive success. Competition comes with competition. We'll win some, we'll lose some. That's the love of the game. When we lose, it might be, it's not, oh, hang our heads or anything. It's an opportunity to get better. So, academically though, I tell all the students, if you relieve yourself of the academic pressure, get all your stuff done, make sure your homework is done before you get on the game, you're going to play so much better. if you're sitting in the middle of a rivals game, sitting there going, man, I have this art project due in 2 hours after I get off this game, you're going to be stressing throughout the game. You're not going to be at your highest level. So, when it comes
100%,
to,
man. Yeah.
yeah, it's not like playing at the pros. When you're at the pro level, you're truly just focused on esports, constantly improving your skill sets and stuff. I have a lot of my rivals players sitting here going like, well, I want to rank up, I want to do this, and I tell them, I'm like, ranked is no representation of what you do in comp. When we play these competitive games, you can be plat and you can still beat Celestials. My rivals team beat a whole team of Celestials and they're right now around a diamond average. I was telling them, I was like, your rank doesn't represent what you do here in a team environment. So, when we're in school and stuff, I preach to them. I'm like, get your schoolwork done. Rank will come. That opportunity will present itself when we don't have classes. I literally told all my best players on that team, I was like, hey, once this semester's over, winter break hits, hit ranked as hard as you can. Get those games in, see where your true average is at right now. But, while we're in classes, make sure you're taking care of your academic stuff. We practice, every week. So, use the opportunities that you have to just work on your stuff with a team, not necessarily focus about your individual qualities because everyone's individual skills do play a huge role in esports. But when you're in this environment of having a team, improving the team as a whole is the most important thing. So make sure you're getting your academics done. Make sure to stay on top of your grades. We have great student support services here. They're all on top of our students, getting their grades and stuff up. So yeah, I think we have a great system here for all that. And I really, as a coach, I try to support their endeavors as professionals. That's my biggest thing. They're here for 4 to 5 years to compete. They have 5 years of eligibility in the leagues that we play in. I told them all. They all laugh when I say this, and I think it's funny. But I said you have 4 to 5 years to compete as kindly as possible. After that, I don't want to see you again. But meaning, I want to see you go do bigger and better things. It's one of those like, I don't want to see you here for 7 years because you're failing classes and focusing on gaming too much because if you're here for 7 years, not only are you, not staying on top and furthering your career, but you're also spending money. College costs money, and I can only do so much for you for 4 to 5 years. Once that time's up, there's not much I can do for you. So, I really try to pressure these kids into, making sure they're taking care of their academics and being the best versions of themselves so that, after those 4 to 5 years are done, they're on doing bigger and better things and they're coming back to visit instead of sitting in the classroom longer than they need to be. So,
Sounds good. Where do you see the Glenville esports program in the next 5 years, and how do you plan to elevate its presence in the collegiate esports scene?
oh, I see us being a powerhouse. I'm a big dreamer. I think when I got this job, everyone knew that. You know, when I filled out my interview or my application for the job, and I interviewed, you know, there was an objective tab in there of like, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a nationally and globally recognized esports program. I don't, I don't want to be one of these programs that, you know, just are mediocre. This is one of those programs that people look at and they're like, oh, we could have 100 kids who just come in here and play, and I'm like, yeah, we could, but we could also just reduce the number by half and have 50 who are dedicated and really really good competitors. So I see us being one of those teams that we quality over quantity. I want us to have the best possibility in every league we play in with the best players that we have at the time. I want us to keep elevating the levels, individual improvements, team improvements. I'm truly one of those people who works on development. I'll recruit, say we're talking Rocket League, I'll recruit a GC and I will sit here and I'm like, I hope you know that once you get here as a GC, you're leaving as an SSL. We're going to improve these skills. So, our biggest thing is just constantly improving, becoming better versions of ourselves in the game as well as a program. And then, yeah, just taking the country by storm. The we can, we will watch us is one of those things that we live by. You know, we haven't been heard, and now people are starting to see us in these leagues, and they're looking at us going, "Man, what's happening with Glenville State esports?" We competed in CRL last week. We played some top programs. We played Florida played St. Mary's, who else did we play? George Mason. We played all these powerhouses, and funny enough, I know some of the players on those teams. George Mason, I'll give him a shout. Tihan's a good friend of mine, and we actually played against him. And he was like, "Who's Glenville?" And I was like, "Well, now you're asking the question. Now you know who we are. We're coming up, and we're going to be this program." So, a lot of people are starting to notice us, and come 5 years, once we get to that point, it's not going to be who is Glenville. It's going to be, wow, look at Glenville. Everyone's going to be watching us, seeing what we can truly do, and no, it's super special what we have here, and we're just going to keep building on it. And yeah, the goal is to compete against these high level schools because we're surrounded by them. We don't have the choice to be, mediocre and just kind of exist. Right up the road from us is WVU, huge esports program. Right down the road from us is Concord. We're in a powerhouse area of esports. We're in the West Virginia region where you see all these huge schools. George Mason, Radford. We're not too far from the Carolinas where you have Winthrop. They just signed Garrett G. So when I talk to these recruits, I'm sitting here going, we got to compete with this, and we're not gonna put ourselves in a position to just get run over by these teams. We're gonna run through them, and we're gonna beat every single one of them. So, really try and build this program to be a powerhouse. That's the goal of any coach, but we have the opportunity to really do it here with the facility and all the support and resources we have.
Well, if I was college age, dude, sign me up, man, because I'd love to play for you.
Hey, let's do
This,
it. Come back, get your master's degree or something. Come back.
there you
You
go.
got you got some eligibility. I know you do.
Um, I was gonna say that motto that you guys have for your school. What is it exactly again? Say it one more time,
We will watch us.
dude. That
Um,
is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I came up with that. Because as I said, we weren't a huge like known team. Like we weren't a program that people looked at on their game schedule. Sometimes we're like, man, we got to play that team. I'll tell you right now, in our PCL ranked divisions, those teams see us and they get scared. So, people are definitely starting to recognize us now in these scenes, and it's great. We we got some, like I said, we got some great competitors here, and we're only going to keep improving. I'm talking to a lot of different athletes who are at the highest level of their games, competing in high school esports right now, competing, professionally, doing all these different things. So, right now we might be in these ranked divisions, but give us a little bit more time. You'll see us in these top tier divisions and not just participating, but winning these games.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know from for those of you that don't know, me and Austin are friends in real life. We've been to a couple of different events together and stuff like that. But I know that with you at the helm, everything is going to change for this program, and I know you're going to just guide this to the moon. So
I
I'm cheering for
appreciate
you
that.
guys.
I
For
appreciate that a
for
lot.
Of course, man. And I mean it. For students hoping to break into collegiate esports, either as a player or in roles like coaching or management, like yourself, is the biggest piece of advice that you could give them?
Um, Keep an open mind. This is a community of, esports in general is just a community of so many different people. You know, don't don't shut anyone out. You never know who does what anyone's going through, with the mental health side of this stuff, it's really stressful. So, don't block yourself off from other people outside of, your realm of normality. Get outside, get uncomfortable, be around these people because, you know, I was one of those athletes in high school. I was so traditional. I won't even lie. I was like, oh, big macho wrestler dude. That was my life. That was my life. And when I kind of broke into esports, it was one of those where I started noticing all these different people that I was being surrounded by, and I was like, man, like I would have probably never hung out with these people when I was in high school. But I'm so grateful that when I got into esports, I had an open mind and I started hanging out with them because some of those people are now my best friends and people I really truly rely on. And I think it's one of those where once you get into esports and you really open your mind up to what the community really is about, you're never going to want to leave it. It's phenomenal. It's one of the most inviting communities when you get a part of that group that you really truly love. And I tell people diversity is what makes this sport so great. Including people. I always love to talk about this streamer. Don't necessarily know his name, but he's a quadriplegic amputee. Um, and he plays Call of Duty on TikTok and all these things, and he plays with a mouthpiece, and he's like Crimson and COD.
Yeah.
You sit here and you're
I think
looking,
I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, like anyone can do this. Anyone can be at a high skill level. You just have to have an open mind and you have to be, excited to see those people in your community. A lot of people look at different people in their communities, whether it's, esports, traditional sports and stuff, and like have this grudge. You can't have that. You have to really accept everyone for who they are and just be happy that, there's so many different people who come from different ways of life who enjoy the same thing that you enjoy. So, you know, if you're going to break into esports, you just have to have an open mind and just be inviting to everyone who you cross paths with.
Beautiful. Uh, Before taking the position that you currently have at Glenville right now, you worked as an esports photographer for Elevate, I think, for a little bit, and also for Good Game Family, which is a
hmm
nonprofit organization. What was your favorite event that you've attended so far in a photography aspect, and why?
Yes, I did get to work with Elevate for a bit there. That was a fun time. Like I said, I met Justin at DreamHack Atlanta last year. Led to me actually photographing for him again at DreamHack Dallas for his Brawl Star team. And then yeah, Good Game Family. Good Game Family is the one that got it all started for me. Brandon over there, he's awesome. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't have gotten into esports without him. So huge thanks to him for that. Um, we wouldn't be sitting here talking if it wasn't for that either. We probably would have never
True.
crossed paths. So,
Yep.
super grateful for all the opportunities that came my way. And no, I love it. Who talk about favorite event though? That's a hard one because I've been to three of them now in the past year for esports, and they all had their own, how do I say it? Like their own individual qualities that made it so fun. Um, this is gonna be a random one because I actually didn't attend this with either of the teams I photographed with. But ESL One Raleigh was a
I knew you were
blast.
gonna say that. I
I
knew you were gonna
I
say that.
I had so much fun at that event. It was a Dota 2 event. I
hmm
have no clue about Dota. I've never played Dota. I just thought it was a cool event that was not too far from where I live. Um, but man, that was a blast. That was probably talk about diversity of people. There were so many people from all around the world that attended that event that I really, in a smaller environment compared to a DreamHack, I got to actually talk to and meet, and I got to talk to some really high up people from different orgs. I got to meet the directive creator of Liquid East, yeah, Liquid, um, and Team Liquid and all them. I also got to meet people from Ovilus, Falcons, all these different orgs, and it was just a blast. And then talking to the people who were at that event too, they love it. I always laugh because like Dota 2 is truly an Eastern European game. And to talk to all the fans that came halfway across the world for that game just to watch it in Raleigh, North Carolina, man, they were a blast. I had so much fun with all of them. It really showed me what a small community of what people enjoy is capable of. Because, DreamHack, you run into all these different groups. When we went to DreamHack Dallas, they had Halo, they had CSGO, they had CSGO Impact, which really love CSGO Impact. Really sad to hear the news that came out about it that it's no longer going to be a thing after this season. Um, but all those players, they give their heart and soul to the game as well, and you get to kind of see a little broader aspect of everything when you go to those dream hacks. But now going to Raleigh, that was a blast. I got to really see what esports was really about for these people, and man, they love it. They love it.
I literally, before I asked you the question, I literally knew you were gonna say Raleigh. I don't know why, I just knew you were going to.
It was so fun. Like I don't know, like it was also like the first event that was like just like the everyday person was in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
hmm
there was dudes from Russia in there who they were just having a good time, kicking back, drinking beers, and watching some Dota. And I was sitting there, I was like, man, you guys are just. I was running into you like walking downtown. Like you're not the like person that I think of when I think of esports. And no, it was just fun. It was just a blast.
Awesome. Uh, while working as an esports photographer, what lessons can you take from doing that and apply it to your current position at Glenville?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk about that a lot with my students. Networking. Networking is a huge thing. I met so many great people being an esports photographer, and I tell all my students now I have this awesome opportunity from the networking I did at all these events as a photographer to kind of give these opportunities to my students now. You know, I got to meet Justin. I talk to Justin all the time about, what can we do for Glenville State esports and, relation to Elevate. And you know, I broadened my horizon so much, even with Good Game Family, having these opportunities for my students to kind of see what esports is truly about. Um, you know, I think the best part you can do when you go out to these events, and this is the part of esports that's so different from traditional sports. These players are among you every event you're at. You're gonna run in like when we went to Dallas. I got to see Beans and Joe DeZeves from um, Toronto Ultra. Just walking, they were going to watch freaking CS:GO. They weren't even watching their game. And there's still games going on for CDL.
Yeah,
And these people were just among you in the crowd. And I always say like you never know who does what. You never know who's a part of what group doing whatever thing. At ESL Raleigh too, I'll say, I met a person that wanted to work with Good Game Family, and they weren't part of our staff, but she was just I was literally in line for autographs for myself. I like my autographs. I'm a huge autograph guy. But she was standing in line. I had stickers, and I handed her a sticker. She was like, "Good Game Family." I was like, "Yeah." And then she was like, "Yeah, I interviewed and I wanted to work, but I just didn't have the time to do it." And then I text Brandon. I'm like, "Do you know this person?" And he was like, "Yeah." And it's just you never know who you're gonna run into at these events, and that's where I always tell people, that's again where that open mind aspect comes into play, where talk to anyone. That everyone there is there for the same exact reason, to enjoy high quality, high level gameplay, and just talk. That's what everyone's there for. We're here to watch good esports, but also just to be a part of this community that's bigger than us. And so when you kind of open your mind and you start communicating with people, you never know who you're going to talk to.
100%, 100%. Another great answer. I'm blown away by your answers, by the
Thank you. I try.
way.
I try my best.
Is there a specific game that you're going to focus on to maybe blow up the esports program on a more national scale, uh, for Glenville, or is your attention going to be for every game all at once, or you know?
Don't want to give away too much, but there definitely is two games that I'm really looking in right now. Looking at the scope of what collegiate esports is, the highest competitions, the most players for those games. Um, I'll give you the titles, but I'm not going to tell you any of my recruits because I don't know who's watching, who's going to take my
No,
players
yeah,
from
no,
me.
no. Don't tell me the
But
recruits. This the titles. Yeah,
Rocket League and Valorant are two of the big ones we're looking into right now.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, we were gonna go into Halo, but currently with the state of Halo, with them shutting down their pro scene, the collegiate scene hasn't really made up their mind yet of if they're gonna maintain it or not. If they decide to maintain it, Halo's definitely one on our scope as well. And then Call of Duty as well. Rivals, Rivals is kind of just continuously falling into my lap. We have some really high level players for that game, and it just seems like people want to come here and play Rivals. So we're definitely going to take over with Rivals as well, but that's kind of like one of those where I've done maybe one or two recruiting calls, and think I've signed like three players now who I've never even talked to. They've just been like, "Yep, I'm coming to Glenville," and I'm like, "Oh, great!" And I got you in my lap here, playing esports for me. So it's one of those where definitely Rivals is going to be one for us as well. But no, recruiting wise, right now we're definitely looking into Rocket League and Valorant very heavy, and then Call of Duty as well.
Awesome. Wow. Uh, wow. Okay. Esports is is heavily tied to technology advancements. How do you stay ahead of trends in gaming hardware, software platforms, maybe sponsorships and stuff like that. For Counter-Strike, there's a third-party program called Leadify. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Hmm.
Keeps track of all your stats and stuff like that. Are there similar programs that you're going to be using or looking into to track your students, advancements and stuff like that?
Yeah, so right now this semester has been a little, we're trying to get everything figured out, just make sure competition and academics are going well. But I'm super blessed as well. I have some great work studies here. I have about 3 to 4 different students who work for the esports program, who help out with creative work, making sure our room's well maintained. I have a student whose job is literally just coming and checking on the PCs every day. So I have these students who are really involved, so, it's not necessarily staying on top of it in the sense of, buying all the new big best things. We are going to be doing that. We have we're gonna these improvements we're gonna have by next fall that you're gonna see here soon are gonna be they're gonna be shocking. We're working with a lot of companies who, when you talk about trends, they're big names in the esports industry. Um, and working with them to, I tell my players all the time, I want to elevate this program, but I also want to get your name out there. So I truly looked at, companies and people who are in the esports scene who, when we win things and they repost it, the best way to get my students' names out there. Because again, you might come into collegiate esports thinking, oh, it's just an opportunity for me to get my degree. I'm at high level. I want to compete. You never know who's watching. So, really trying to stay on top of trends, meaning, putting ourselves out there with companies who are powerhouses in the scene. Um, that's the way we're staying on top of trends. I'm not going to give away any names right now because nothing's finalized yet, but there's definitely going to be some companies that we work with who are going to improve our name and get our reach out there trends wise. And great technology, the best peripherals, PCs, anything we can find. We're going to make sure we have it here.
Awesome. And I wanted to ask because I really don't know. This podcast obviously is for, educational purposes and things like that where I interviewed different people that are involved in the esports industry and stuff like that. So yourself, the esports director of a college and stuff like that. Now, I'm gonna ask a question. Is there like sponsorships and stuff like that available for college athlete or college esports programs? Like for instance, like the Oregon Ducks, right? Like
Yeah.
their entire sports program is sponsored by Nike, right? Because
Hmm.
Phil Knight, I believe, went to Oregon University or something
Yeah.
like that. He,
That's also where the training center for track is and
e- e-
everything.
exactly, yeah. And so is there stuff like that available for college esports? Like, if you wanted to have your PCs that you play on, I don't want to insinuate that you're going to be sponsored by iBuyPower, but if you approach iBuyPower and was like, hey, we have this esports program, is that something that's actually available right now, or is that something that is maybe coming on the horizon because the esports programs at colleges are so new?
So it's definitely something that's out there. It's definitely on the horizon, but when I got this job, that's something I promised. I was like, we're gonna work with these companies and everything. So you kind of have to have this go-getter mentality when it comes to those opportunities. They're not gonna contact you. You have to contact them. So, there's definitely plenty of opportunities out there for all these different things. But as a coach and a director, it's your job to go get it. These companies aren't going to just be flooding your email saying like, "Oh, please, please, please." No. You have to go do it. You have to build up the program and these relationships with these external companies to really bring those opportunities to your campus. If you just sit around and wait, then yeah, you're just going to be buying your own stuff. You're not going to have any involvement from these companies. And while that's fine, there's that opportunity to have that involvement and to work one on one with these companies. And that's what's important. So you really, as a director or as a coach, have to go out and say, you know, I really like what this company's doing. How do I convince them what we're doing plays into what they're doing?
So that
So,
their mission has to align with your mission, is what you're saying.
for me, I personally believe so. I'm a big person who thinks that esports is for everyone. It's such a diverse role. You can wake up tomorrow. You can't wake up. You will say this. You can't wake up tomorrow and say, "I want to go play running back at 35 years old," and you haven't hit the gym in the last 20 years. Not, it doesn't work like that. But you can wake up tomorrow and sit down and start playing Call of Duty, FIFA, whatever it is, and just day by day start working on your skills, keep improving. It might not be, oh, it's going to happen by tomorrow, but the more time you put into it and the more work you do, there's no real age gap or limit to where you can say like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Look at Apex, for example. Apex is in his 30s for CSGO, and he's killing it. You know, Kerrigan,
He's not very
same thing.
popular, but he is killing it. You're right. Yeah.
Hey, that Vitality team is a heck of a team. I'm telling you that. But it's there's no age limit on when you can start to do this stuff. You see it with content creation a lot. Whether your goal is to compete or be a part of the community in the aspect of creating content for people who enjoy the games and stuff. Anyone can start doing it at any age, and that's kind of the beauty of it. And that's again open mind. Big person on having an open mind when it comes to these things. So, yeah, it's it's phenomenal. I love it. I love the esports community. I love what it stands for.
Cool. Another awesome answer. Competitive esports can be intense for student athletes. What steps do you take to support your players' mental health and foster strong team dynamics, team chemistry, stuff like that? There's a lot of esports organizations and stuff like that that employ um, like a sports psychologist, sports nutritionist, stuff like that. Is that something that maybe you would want to do in the future going forward with Glenville as the program grows and things like that?
So my big thing with it is, esports takes a lot of self-reflection and team reflection. So, after every game that we play, I make my students stand up and walk away from the PC. And it's one of those where it's like we don't stand up to go talk about the game anymore. We stand up to go. I don't care what you ask each other, just don't talk about the game for 5 minutes. Ask how the weather is outside, even though we haven't been outside for the last hour. Anything but the game. Because as you said, it's tolling. It's one of those things that if you sit at a PC all day, every day, and all you do is play video games, you disconnect from society a little bit. You become, I don't like saying this necessarily, but it's chronically like online. You only know how to thrive off of the internet. So I really try to, disconnect them from it a bit and then bring them back into it so that they kind of have this aspect of, we're not just talking through our headsets, we're talking through actual physical interactions. So I think it's really important to, for their mental well-being to kind of balance like reality with gaming. So, you know, I tell people all the time, it's one of those like the best athletes that are in esports have this personality to where they can go out in public and still communicate. They don't need a headset. They don't need to just be sitting behind a screen. They can really be out in society and still function and be, productive in that sense. So, when it comes to the mental health side, I always tell them, I'm like, go out, do stuff. We go out to sports games here on campus. We took the whole team out to a soccer game to support one of the other teams on campus. We just had a boxing event here on campus. We have a boxing team at Glenville State, and it was a huge, huge event. All my student athletes were at it pretty much. Two of them even boxed and had a fight last night. So, they're on that team as well. So, we go out and support. We make sure we show some love to everyone else out there, and it kind of helps us disconnect from the game a little bit and still bring reality into our lives.
Perfect. I love that. Um, the esports industry is growing rapidly. What trends do you see shaping the future of collegiate esports, and how is Glenville State positioning itself to adapt?
I mean, collegiate esports is the trend. That's the beauty of it. Like I talked about earlier, we're like NA. We've been a little behind on esports and everything. Europe has an established tier one, tier two, tier three for almost all their games. You know, college esports here is tier two, tier three. It is that opportunity to show your skills and present yourself to these higher up organizations. So, the trend is, be a powerhouse in this scene because if we can compete at a high level, that recognition will come from all these other people that who are going to see what we're doing. There's pro players in college already, you know, so many great programs out there who've been doing this for a while, who their kids go on to do amazing things at the professional level. So, I think the biggest thing is making sure that we stay up on trends that are happening here in collegiate esports And, whether it's game titles, whether it's competitions, going to lands, doing all these other things, getting that visibility, you know, we have to be a part of it. We can't watch other teams do it year in, year out and sit here at Glenville and be like, well, why aren't we getting recognition? Well, we have to go out and be a part of these events and really be a part of the community. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is just this is the trend. The college esports in North America is the biggest trend. So, making sure that we are a not only thriving ourselves, but also helping the esports community thrive as a whole, through competition and our student athletes.
Another out of the box answer that I was not expecting from you. That was wow. Uh, beyond winning tournaments, how does participation in the esports program benefit a student's in terms of skills, career opportunities, and personal growth?
So I think, I tell all my student athletes, communication's a big thing. In esports, you communicate more than you would in any other sport, and that's just a personal opinion. I have a Rocket League team who they've all for 5 years been playing by themselves, and their hardest struggle right now is communicating what they're doing, making sure that every aspect of the game that they're talking and making sure that everyone else knows where they're at on the field, doing all these different things. So it's something we've really been working on. So you learn great communication skills. You also kind of learn how to be a leader instead of a follower. Everyone has their own opinion. We all voice our opinions when it comes to these games. It doesn't matter what rank you are, it doesn't matter what skill set you have. You could be a bronze on a full, celestial team in rivals. If you see something, you need to speak up about it. That's a big thing that I preach is, everyone has a voice. When the captain's talking, give the captain the floor to talk, right? But if you notice something in the game, speak your opinion, because your opinion could change the way the captain or someone on the team at higher leadership power has, and propel them to see what you're seeing and then say, well, let's change up what we're doing actually and go this route. So, you kind of learn how to be a leader in the sense of speaking up for yourself, being more confident, which helps with many aspects of life. And then also just team environment. We learn, in collegiate esports how to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Like I said, my program here, we're a program. We're not 7 different teams. We all support one another. We're all on the same team, and we really live and preach by that. And going out into the facility, which I'm literally attached to the facility right here. I walk outside my office, and all my PCs that I have access to for my students is right out there. So, you know, being a part of this group where you can walk out of your office and see two people who aren't even on the same team playing different games, all these different things. You really get to learn how to be in a team environment and truly thrive in a setting like that. And I think those three things, honestly, those are so important in just general life as well. You don't, you know, I never saw myself doing this. I was always in the photography scene. I was always doing all these different things with, creative work. But, you know, through esports, I kind of got to learn how to be this leader and to step up and make these decisions. And now I'm in this role where, my entire career right now is making these decisions that, help or, propel students to do bigger and better things. So, esports is all about, team communicating and just being a late leader in and out of the game.
Beautiful. This is going to be kind of a fun one for you. So I want you to look directly at the camera, fix your hair a
Yeah,
little bit, put on your
yeah.
best smile, and
I got this. I got the glare on me right here, but we'll try.
make your best pitch to any potential high school students or current college players at other universities about why they should come or transfer to Glenville to play for you.
I mean, it's simple. I think we have one of the best communities out there. I've seen a lot of different programs. I've seen a lot of different competitors and everything, and our energy in this room is the best I've ever seen. We have such a diverse room with people who you would never think of surrounding yourself with, who you end up coming in here and you start loving this environment. So, you're going to come here and be a part of something bigger than even just the one team that you're part of. You're part of this program where everyone wants to thrive. Everyone has the same mentality of, let's win, let's be the best we can every day. And then on top of that, just improving our skills. You know, a lot of schools out there, they look at you and they say, well, I want you to come play Rocket League for me. I want you to come play Rivals for me. Yeah, so that's ultimately what I want as well. But I also want to sit here and help you improve your skill set and make sure that you are developing yourself as a better player and a better person out there just in the day-to-day life. So, you know, the opportunity here is not just to come and play a game, it's to really hone and improve your skill set and develop yourself as a better gamer and a better individual in life. So I think that's something very different from other programs out there. And then also just to be a part of something that's going to take over this country. Yeah, I think we're a program right now that no one's really heard of. So, you know, now they're starting to hear about us, but anyone that comes here is going to be a part of something bigger and better. And, you know, it's going to be one of those where, um, you know, I told all my Rocket League players when we played CRL the other day, I was like, you guys win one of these games, people are going to look at this bracket and be like, wow, who's this school that's starting to win some games? And you know what? We didn't win a game, but you know, we had some close matches against some of the best teams in the country. You know, I had a team of a GC and a champ play against Florida, and Florida is like a top 30 program in the country right now. They won the whole state of Florida esports competition for Rocket League. Game one was a little rough. Game two, though, they came out 5-1. And those are two SSLs who were like 21 MMR. And those two players who had no potential on paper to even compete with that team came out game two and said, you know what, we're not gonna let this stop us, and we're gonna give them a fight for their money, and they did it. And so when you come here, you know, you're kind of gonna be a part of this program that, you know, you're gonna start beating some teams, you're gonna win some games, and people are gonna look at you and be like, man, who's this program? And that's something special to be a part of, you know, being a part of a program that's taking over a country, and especially in certain games that have been very well known in collegiate esports, something really cool to be a part of.
Well, I can tell you right now that if you lead the way that I know that you're capable of leading, your
Hmm.
players are going to want to come, or people are going to want to come and play for you, and they're going to want to run through a brick wall for you because the 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 answers to the questions that you had, it blew my mind. I'll be honest with you. They were
I appreciate
above
it.
and beyond what I thought you were going to say and things like that. Very eloquent, very positive message, and I love everything you're doing, honestly.
Appreciate it.
And I
Thank
know
you.
that you're going to build an awesome program going forward. Is there
Thank you.
anything you want to talk about? Anyone you want to shout out or anything like that?
I mean, just want to say thanks to you for having me on here today. I mean, it's an awesome opportunity. Love any opportunity I get to talk about this program and the students that I have here because they're all great. Shout out to Glenville State. You know, without them, none of this would be possible. Having this program here, all my student athletes, phenomenal student athletes. I couldn't be in the position I am without them either. You know, this entire school is just built around making us successful. So I really appreciate all them. You know, as I mentioned, Brandon as well from Good Game Family. Just want to thank him for, you know, getting me into this realm. My coach from college, you know, Coach Morgan, he, without him, you know, constantly supporting me. He was a wrestler too before switching to esports, so he had direct insight on what it took to get me to the level that I'm at. And then just all my teammates and everyone who've helped me along the way, you know, my family as well, mom and dad. You know, the two of them live up in Pittsburgh, supported me for 5 years down in Tennessee. Now I'm in West Virginia, so I get to be a little closer to them and really bond with them more, and they get to see a little more hands-on what I'm doing. So no, I'm really grateful for all my family as well. But yeah, no, this is special. I love what I get to do every day. I wake up, I get here at 10 a.m., I leave at 2 a.m. And you know, my sleep schedule's a little messed up, but it's worth it. Every single day, it's worth it.
Heck yeah, man. Awesome. I'm gonna put Austin's socials down below this video, and I'm gonna put Glenville's website and socials down below. And if you're a high school student that's good at esports, has a good head on your shoulders, and academically good, hit up this guy right here. He's doing great things. This
I
was
appreciate that.
episode 5 of Beyond the Clutch, and thank you for watching, guys.
Thank you guys.